Hey everybody, welcome to GradMissions Office Hours. I'm Lisanne Carlson here with GradMissions, obviously, and also with us is Autumn Lockett,
Hi,
our
everyone.
founder. Yes. And this is our second podcast with Office Hours. We're super excited to come to you all. We just got finished with our weekly huddle where we talk about things that are going on with our clients and celebrating their wins. And last week, we kicked off the podcast with sort of a post-mortem for the JD cycle this year, the JD 25 cycle. Not that it's necessarily over, but it is coming to an end. And so we kind of talked about tips and ideas and encouragement for students who are in the current cycle, maybe still waiting on their dream school decision. Also encouraging folks for JD 26 and going forward. So if you're interested in that, check out the first podcast that we released last week. But we decided this week we're going to shift it to the medical school side of things and kind of just stay in tune with that postmortem for the medical school
It
application.
seems more appropriate here, right?
It
Like
does,
we're
yes,
actually in the cadaver lab today.
right, yes, sure. So Autumn, tell us, so when we talk about JD admissions, it's kind of a linear process
It
for
is.
law school applications. Would you say the same for medical school?
I mean, it's linear, but it's also like you're tap dancing backward in heels.
Okay.
If that makes sense. It feels higher stakes to me. And this is from someone who has been on the dean of admissions side of things from law school and the dean of admissions side in med school. And watching these applicants to med school run through the gauntlet that it is for them to apply is it's grueling. And that was part of why I made such a quick exodus. I wasn't even there quite 2 years because it was painful to watch. And
Mm.
so many of them made goofy mistakes and never even were considered for an interview because of the way they put their app together.
Oh no.
I know.
And so I'm an attorney. I've been through the law school process and we worked together quite extensively on the law
I
school.
just play one on TV.
No, I say that, not like so great,
No,
but
I'm just
yeah,
being
because
silly.
you have really been educating me on the medical side of things because it's not even, it wasn't even a part of my brain before. And
Sure.
that's why I say that because you are truly the expert on medical school admissions. And I feel like you've been teaching me since we've been working together and you've done a really great job of teaching because it is a gaunt. I'm like, now wait, they don't do this, they do that, and there's all these different ways. So what's kind of like a high level, if you're looking at the medical school application process, and I know there's MD and DO and all these different things. So could you tell us kind of how that would differ from law school admissions?
So if you're applying to law school in the US, there is one CAS system. It is AMCAS, which is run by LSAC, who also runs the LSAT, and they have just basically like cornered the whole market. There's a couple of other test companies. JD Next is trying to, do something, but are they? Question mark. I don't know. So they
Mhm.
basically have the market. So if you're applying to a law school in the US, you have one CAS system, you fill it out. The law schools will have a couple of extra questions, maybe, but
Yeah.
like for the most part, it's a pretty streamlined process.
Through LSAC.
School is like the wild, wild west. So
Yeah.
it sort of feels to me like the Schuyler sisters in the Hamilton musical because it's like,
Mhm.
so you have the MD, right? And then you
Right.
have the DO, and these two things are always sort of people who apply to MD are very all about their MD, and people who had applied to DO are all about the DO. And then some people who I think are smart apply to both because it's really a way to kind of hedge
Yeah.
your bet. And then the Peggy, Schuyler sister of this trio, is Ann Texas because they
Yeah.
have their whole own caste system and they do it completely different, and no one even can have access to their applicants. And so it's just,
That sounds right.
yeah, just right on brand. As a Texan, I feel like I can trash talk my state a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And so the caste system is just different. But okay, and then talk a little bit about MD and DO and why students who look at both are smarter.
Yeah, right. Okay, so unless you are 100% DO, that's your family, that's the only kind of doctor you've ever seen, you really are very like naturopath, homeopathic, it's more holistic, more about preventative care. That is DO. MD is called allopathic medicine. So you have osteopathic and allopathic medicine. Traditionally, when people are describing this high level, the MD is more you treat the symptoms, and it's very pharmacy based. And it's very rare for an MD program to have anything about nutrition, dietetics, food as medicine, preventative care, those kind of things. Now, what's happening in the past 8 to 10 years, especially accelerated post-COVID, is the MD world is starting to be like, hey girl, hey, like maybe this DO world homeopathic space, there is room. If I could pick, if I was the queen of all things medicine, they would marry these programs and be so much stronger together. But they are
Makes
what they are, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
when you apply to both, historically, the DO programs take lower ranked students, right? Students who don't score as well on the MCAT or don't have a strong science GPA. That is not always true, but that's sort of the broad strokes. MD programs typically require a higher MCAT score and a higher science GPA. And historically, MD students, so students who go through the MD program, have a higher success rate in residency match. So when after your 4 years of med school, guess what? You get more schools. So you do a residency rotation or residency program that you have to apply to. Certain specialties. So here's some specialties: plastics, neurosurgery, pediatrics, internal medicine, OB-GYN, all these like specialty doctors that you go to have
Right.
to and even general, even if you just want to just want to practice general medicine, you still have to go into a
That's
residency
still a
program.
specialty, general. Yeah.
Exactly, right. It's
Yeah.
generally you have to know everything. And so the more competitive resident plastics, neurosurgery, those kind of things, typically MD students match to those at a higher success rate. That is starting to change a little bit. Those DO schools are inching up, and I think it's because higher ranked students are seeing the value of a DO degree. And so people going into DO want to do those higher level specialties. So I think it's a little bit of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. I got it. So, as we wrap up the application cycle for med schools for this year, do you see how is it kind of similar to law schools where you see med school apps being up? Do they kind of follow similar patterns as law schools as far as applications?
They really don't.
Okay.
As you can imagine, they were especially impacted by COVID. You know,
Right.
we had a span of 2.5 years there where you couldn't get a shadowing hour, you couldn't get a
Yeah.
clinical hour. There are a lot of prerequisites required to go to med school, unlike law school, right? You can play the bassoon for 4 years and go to law school. As long as you can get that LSAT score, you can go into law school. With med
Mhm.
school, you have to have taken some specific science courses, and you have to have taken those science courses to do well on the MCAT. And
Yeah.
so it just has a higher, you just have to have done more things. And
Yes.
so part of those requirements are clinical patient-facing hours, shadowing hours. They actually require you to be in a hospital clinic setting. If you're going DO route, you need to have observed and worked alongside some DOs. And so because there was this 2.5 year period where you couldn't get into a hospital, right? Partners couldn't even go in with spouses having babies there for a little while
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
COVID. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a backlog. So we did see a little bit of a bubble after some of those restrictions were released. People who couldn't get shadowing hours suddenly could. But it has really balanced back out. And in fact, apps are even slightly down right now.
Okay.
The
Okay.
COVID situation scared a lot of people off healthcare,
Okay.
understandably. And so we need people to apply to med school
Okay.
desperately.
Well, that's good to know. And that totally makes sense because if, you weren't able to get those clinical experiences, maybe people were taking a gap year or something so that they could get those shadowing hours before they apply.
That's right.
So someone who is, and like we talked about law students, they can be like Elle Woods and decide, I'll go to law school one day.
But go to law
But
school.
to apply for medical school, you really have to have that high science GPA and also those experiences. So when would you say a student should start if they want to go to med school, when should they start charting their course, so to speak?
I think probably the summer between second and third grade is really, I
I knew you were going to say something like that.
Oh, Lysanne, I'm
Oh,
just kidding.
I know.
I mean, it wouldn't be a bad
But
idea
that's what it looks like to me. I'm like, it seems like you have to have decided to your seventh grade year. You have to have known, you have to find
to
a
be a doctor.
doctor in
Yeah,
your family or your mom's friend's uncle who's a doctor. It sounds really inaccessible.
yeah. Okay, so I had an epiphany last night. Is it okay for me to share this?
Yeah, please.
Um, I started out pre-med. That
Yeah.
was my dream, was
Great.
to be a doctor. And I'm a first gen. My dad's a plumber. My mom only has a high school degree. And my dad went to college for like 2 years and played baseball and then like ran the family plumbing business. So I didn't have a support system. And I went to college and was a very good science and math girly. Like I was a STEM girly, but I came from a small town and got into I was doing great in my chemistry classes and my bio classes, doing great, but I just did not have. I had a pre-health advisor who also took care of pharmacy and
Right.
OT, PT, all of the things. And I got to meet with her like once, and she was like, "Yeah, just keep doing this." And I'm like, I'm looking around, everyone's talking about their shadowing hours, how they're going to be an EMT, how they're getting phlebotomy labs, and I was so intimidated that I just changed my major.
Mm.
And oh my gosh, it like makes me a little verklempt because I was telling Josh, my husband, last night, I was like, I am trying to be the pre-med advisor
Yeah, that you needed.
that I wish I'd had
Yeah.
because I absolutely could have done it, right? Like they try, I don't even know if anyone's trying, but it just seems like this like insurmountable obstacle. But we are living in a country, in a world that desperately needs healers.
Yeah.
And I'm just so thankful that I'm here now and I know what I know now. I wish I could go back and tell little Autumn what she could do to be a doctor, but wouldn't trade it for the world. And I'm glad I am where I am. Ideally, somewhere between your freshman and sophomore year is when you decide to go into medicine. And if not, you're probably going to have to take a gap year.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And a lot of the work that we do is helping students, not that we're advisors, but like you were saying, these pre-med advisors, same with the pre-law advisors, well, they have an average of an hour per student per
Maybe.
year, maybe even that. And so we are able to sit down with a student during an accelerator intensive and say, okay, you are, and people think this is, people look at us like we have three heads. They're like, my son's graduating from high school and you want to go ahead and work with him. And this is why,
Yeah.
because you're able to sit down and say, okay, sophomore year, you're looking at this. You need to get into biochem before that senior year because that's going to really help you on the MCAT. Things like that, things that these undergraduate students may not understand. And they're on the Reddit forums or they're listening to a friend group and everyone has all these opinions, but you know exactly what that
Right.
student needs to start building that application as soon as their freshman year of undergraduate.
What actually matters, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I'm meeting with students right now who are freshmen. I
Mhm.
have a little posse at Princeton, in fact. And it's funny because they don't know that I'm meeting with the other because obviously we keep things confidential.
Sure.
But you hear the same things, and their friend groups are all spun up about things that do not matter. And my grad missions clients are like, we're just going to be quiet and let you guys like spin up over there, and we're just
Yeah.
going to stay the course. And they have been doing great in their science classes while these people are trying to be involved in every kind of club and extracurricular that I can tell you right now, med schools do not care about. They don't care.
Right. You're taking away from that precious study time or building those shadowing hours like you were talking about. So
That's right.
I
Exactly.
I think that's a common trap for a lot of students, just in general. No matter what profession they pick, they're listening to the friend groups. Not that you can't have great friends who have great goals. And things have
Right.
changed even from when that cousin's friend's uncle was a doctor, or an attorney or a teacher. Things can change. And so to have someone who knows, who has their finger on the pulse of what's happening now in the medical school world, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, it is. And who's focused on what you want to do, right? In those
Yeah.
admissions accelerators, we talk about what your specialty goals are, and if you want to be a cardiologist, but you spend all your shadowing hours in ophthalmology,
Mhm.
well, like, do you really? Like, let's
Yeah.
get in there and make sure you actually like the ins and outs of that kind of work. So there are some other things that we're talking to these folks about. And because there are such strict prerequisites, there's sort of a lockstep. So a quick story I have. a gaggle of girls at Spelman University. It's an HBC, and they have very big med school dreams, right? They want to go to Stanford. They want to go to these, really powerful
Yeah.
med schools. And their pre-med advisor was not giving them great advice, was having them wait until after their MCAT to take biochem.
Mm,
And like biochem is a very huge part of the MCAT. And in fact,
mm,
we had to appeal to the college to be able for them to take it as juniors. And so I start looking at their MCAT statistically out of Spelman, and I'm like, this is a systemic issue. And
yeah.
it's not the pre-med advisor's fault, right? These
For
rules are
sure.
constantly
Yeah.
changing and they have such high turnover. It's not their fault. But
Mm,
investing in this kind of guidance is the difference of some people getting into med school at all, other people going to their top med school or not.
yeah. Yeah. And that's important because, like we were saying, that match day's coming up and all of that. And it's just a whole, what do you call it? The gauntlet. I mean, it is
It's a
just,
gauntlet.
yeah.
We're
And
looking at it from like kind of cradle to grave, so to speak, right? So we
or,
also advise these residents. So like we have residents who we're helping through their app
yeah.
process. We have match coming up here next week. We're nationwide. People will find out where and to what they match so that they know like what they're going to be doing for the rest of their lives. It's so fun, so high stakes.
Yeah. It sounds so fun.
Oh my gosh, it's so sweaty. Um,
And
and
so can you tell a little bit about that? Because that was the thing I was going to ask
yeah.
next is I think, well, one of the things we take great pride in here in Grad Missions is we're not offering you a service and going to give you 3 weeks of support. If
Mhm.
you're work with us as a freshman and undergrad, we're seeing you through your entire educational career
That's
until you match, put on that white coat, swear in as a new attorney, all of those things. And so, can you tell us just a little bit about the residency?
yeah, the residency
Help.
match.
Yes.
So it's called ERAS, is like their caste system basically, and it's almost like dating, right? Like a dating service, which like I know nothing about because I met my husband at camp. But so you applicants who are in their fourth year, going into their fourth year of med school, um, fill out basically an application, and it's very archaic, kind of like the LSAC system is so archaic. This one's even worse. And like you have a certain format you have to do, there's a personal statement to it, and you select what specialty you're interested in, and then some geographic regions that you're interested in. The schools start to see your applications, they interview you, and you rank them, and they rank you, but neither of you can see that. And then
Sure.
there's this like computer system that matches according to
Okay.
the rank, and it's weighted, and so that's sort of how it works. And there's flagging and signaling, there's all these kind of internal inside baseball things that we can talk about. But the long story short is everyone, um you get notified that like yes you've matched or no you haven't. And if you
Mm,
haven't matched like a week before match, like right now, it's called SOAP. And basically you put your app back in the kitty and it resorts, and it's like, okay, where are there openings? And like right now, emergency medicine. You can almost always match into emergency medicine because it's also like the Wild West. And there's some other fields that may have openings, and it changes a little bit cycle by cycle. But post-COVID, there's a lot of emergency medicine need. And you go back in. And so by the time match day comes, you know you've matched somewhere, you just don't know where and what. And so at like 11, at least 11 Central on that date, nationwide, people, it's
yeah.
kind of like section release when we worked in law
See 'em
school.
I've seen friends opening their
Yep,
letter.
they open an
Yeah.
envelope and it says, and then they write it on this little thing, hold up like, I matched here, I matched here, I
Yeah.
matched
Okay.
there. And then
Okay.
that's where they'll go in the fall to start their rounds.
Awesome. So
Their-
so obviously interview is probably a very important piece of that. Do med schools offer interview coaching and assistance, or is that something that
Whoa.
we again offer at Grad
No,
Missions that, yeah.
no, there's none of that. So yeah, so we do mock interviews there. And the cool thing is if we worked with you as a pre-MS1, right, when you're applying to med school, we keep your grad missions portfolio. We are going to charge you for this residency package.
Yeah.
But because we've done a lot of the work, you do get a little bit of a discount, 10% off. And
Yeah.
we help you fill out your ARAS app, write your statement, and hopefully you've done some growth. And it's fun for us to hear what's happened in you in the to you since
Yeah.
we worked with you when you were applying, build
Mhm.
your story even more. That brand that we established and curated application gets even bigger and broader since you've been through 4 years of med school, and or 3 years going into your fourth, and then help you with application.
That's amazing. And I'm sure as a, fourth year, third year medical student, you're obviously very busy and very stressed. And so you're not having to reinvent the wheel. We're
Exactly.
coming in with that foundation. We know them personally because we've spent so much time with them. We know, their goals and their dreams and, maybe their family situation and their geographic preferences. So we're able to sit down and really help them with that match with such an
Right.
important piece of their story. And they're not having to go back through and think about, oh, well, what did I do 4 years ago?
Right.
We're able to
Right.
provide that. So that's amazing.
That's right. That's right. And we're, building this community too. Now we have, grad missions folks who are residents and who are going to be interviewing other people. So the bigger this thing gets, the even more impact that it can make on our clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'm finally starting to run. The match thing has me sweating so bad. I
Oh
guess,
my
yeah, I
gosh, I
mean,
know.
that's just
Because you've invested so much time and
right.
money and brain power, and then it's like you're just like tossing your name into the wind and hoping that you match where you wanted to
Yeah.
match, that they liked you as much as you liked them, and
Yeah.
that what you did was enough. And there's the thing about residency match, we're probably way deep in the weeds, is USMLE. So there's step one, step two is what they call it in med school. Step one used to be graded. And so it was a way to sort of like differentiate yourself.
I see.
Step one is now pass fail. And
Mhm.
so you're like applying and you have even less ways to stand out amongst your crowd, which are also brilliant med students.
Yeah.
And so, we have some little inside things that we tell our curated clients as they are entering MS1. Here's some things that you might think about doing, saying, working on, connecting with during these 3 years to set yourself up for a more successful match.
That 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 sounds amazing. And we talk a lot about like the mindset work that is,
Mhm.
engineering future attorneys and future physicians. There's so many folks with imposter syndrome, and we kind of sit them down and take them gently by the shoulders and say, "You are meant to be here. You are not,
Yes.
you are meant to be here." And just kind of that mentorship and having someone speak into you and speak it back to you that, hey, you worked hard and you deserve a seat just as much as that person who's got 4 generations of physicians in their family. Um, so just encouraging that our work doesn't stop
Mhm.
once someone is admitted. And I think that is another way that kind of sets us apart. It's like, you're sorry, you're not done with us.
Yes.
We're invested in your future.
Absolutely. And another kind of cool thing I think about grad missions is that we have the background in med and in law. So many high achieving freshmen, sophomore, and undergrad know they want to do med or law. They're not sure which one. And then they end up
Mhm.
switching to the other. Well, great. Our admissions accelerator can meet you exactly where you are. And if you switch to a different glide path in the future, we're here and we have the expertise to help you in
Yeah.
that too and can
Yeah,
help you channel your strengths that you thought were heading this direction for this other direction.
exactly. There's not going to be any pause in the progress, so to
No.
speak. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Full steam ahead.
yeah. Well, thank you again for educating me on the ins and outs of med school application. And so, just one last question. So, when will everything kind of restart or start again for this next
Oh my gosh, that's a great
med school
question.
cycle?
Well, I will say, like, I was actually getting text during this. One of my med students just finished one of her interviews. So if you haven't gotten an interview invite yet this cycle and you're in the application cycle, there is still hope. Interviews are still happening, invites are still happening. Most med schools will start in August. And so the funny thing about med schools though is they'll start in August. But the application where you can start entering your information into the AMCAS system or the double A coma system or the Texas CAS system
Mhm.
starts May 1. It starts May 1. So if you are gearing up and stressed out about any of these things that we have talked about, you can hop on gradmissions.org, book a free 20-minute strategy call. You'll meet with either me or Lizanne. And we will, and just in those 20 minutes, you will at least get like a high level roadmap of where you should go. But then we can also talk about our full packages if you're interested. But we're not going to tough sell you. We're happy to part friends.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you all again for joining us here at GradMissions Office Hours. Once again, I'm Liza Ann here with Autumn. Go to gradmissions.org, book a call with us, or just contact us via socials. Let us know what questions you may have, and we'd love to cover your questions on our next podcast. Until then, bye, friends.